We know what you do.
Execute.
You must not know us.
Okay, I'm starting to think we may have completely underestimated how dangerous this situation is because the episode 3 promo is making one thing very clear. Joe's biggest problem may not be the enemy outside the operation. It may be someone already inside. We already know that Joe is eventually kidnapped in the present timeline, and most of what we're watching right now is happening 6 months earlier. But the closer we get to the moment everything falls apart, the more it feels like somebody is quietly pushing the Lioness team toward disaster. Episode 3 could finally be the point where Joe realizes that the operation has been compromised, but the scary part is that she may not know who she can trust. And if the people behind Joe's kidnapping already have access to information about her team, her family, and their operations, then this is much bigger than a simple mission going wrong. Someone may have been feeding them information from the inside. So, who is the infiltrator? Is there actually someone inside the CIA helping the Russians? And could this breach be the reason Joe eventually ends up captured? Because if episode 3 really starts connecting these pieces, then we could be getting much closer to understanding exactly what happened to Joe. The biggest thing I'm watching going into episode 3 is the breach, because this could completely change the direction of the season. The episode is titled "The Bear is Infected," and even that title feels like a huge clue. The synopsis says Joe confronts a breach, forcing the team to take a risky approach to find the infiltrators. So yeah, this isn't just about another mission going sideways. Someone has gotten inside, and Joe knows that something is wrong. The question is, how long has this person been inside the operation? And more importantly, how much do they already know? Because if someone is secretly passing information to the enemy, then Joe and her team could have been compromised long before they even realized it. And honestly, that would explain a lot of the strange things we've already seen this season. Joe has been trying to understand how certain people keep getting information that they shouldn't have. The enemy seems to know where to look, who to target, and how to put pressure on the people around Joe. That doesn't feel random anymore. It feels like someone is giving them a roadmap. And this is where the Ukrainian spy becomes even more interesting, because I still don't think she's the real problem. In the previous episode, Joe already started questioning whether the operation involving Yurimov had exposed something bigger. The spy gave them important information, and that information helped Joe's team find Yurimov. But now there are questions about whether that same operation created a vulnerability. The people connected to the spy went after her and her family, and that should immediately raise a red flag for Joe. How did they know exactly who she was connected to? How did they know where to apply pressure? And why do they seem to understand the way these intelligence operations work so well? These are the kinds of questions that Joe can't simply ignore anymore. And when Joe finally confronts the woman in the episode 3 promo, things get even more interesting. Joe tells her that her own people came after her and her family, but instead of simply accepting that accusation, the woman pushes back. She talks about monsters and what they do, and that line makes me think she knows much more than she's saying. I could be wrong, but I don't think this woman is the person who betrayed everyone. I think she may actually understand who the real threat is. And if she knows who the monsters are, then Joe may need her help before this whole situation gets worse. Because right now, Joe is trying to solve a problem while not even knowing exactly what the problem is. She knows there has been a breach, but finding an infiltrator inside an intelligence operation is completely different from finding an enemy on the battlefield. You can't just assume the person standing across from you is the threat. The person helping you could be the threat. The person giving you information could be the threat. And that is what makes this storyline so dangerous. Joe has spent her entire career learning how to identify enemies. But what happens when the enemy has learned how to look exactly like one of her own people? And honestly, this could be why Joe becomes so suspicious of everyone around her. We already know that Caitlin has been on my mind throughout this season, and I still can't completely let go of that possibility. I'm not saying Caitlin is definitely the traitor, because we simply don't have enough evidence yet. But the show keeps giving us reasons to question what is happening inside the CIA. If someone really is leaking information, then the person doesn't necessarily have to be physically involved with the Russians. They could simply be passing information along and letting someone else do the dirty work. And that would make the betrayal even harder to detect. Because every time Jo thinks she's getting closer to the truth, another piece of information seems to create even more questions. That is exactly why I think episode 3 could be such an important episode. The breach may not be a separate storyline at all. It could be the first major clue explaining how Jo eventually gets kidnapped. Think about it. If the people behind Jo's kidnapping already know enough about her operations to target people connected to her, then someone may have been watching the Lioness team for a long time. They may know their routines, their technology, their contacts, and most importantly, their weaknesses. And Jo's biggest weakness has always been the people she loves. Her daughters are not just her family. They are the one thing that could make her throw every rule out the window. So, if the enemy wants to control Jo, they don't necessarily have to come directly after her. They could go after the people she would do anything to protect. And that is where I think this season could get really dangerous. Because if the infiltrator is already inside, Jo may be fighting an enemy she can't see while the real attack is happening somewhere much closer to home. And once Jo realizes that, I don't think she's going to sit back and wait for the CIA to handle it. She's going to take matters into her own hands, even if that decision is exactly what leads her into the trap that eventually gets her kidnapped. And if that's where this is heading, then episode 3 may be the moment when everything starts falling apart. And this is where things get even more interesting because I think the infiltrator storyline could connect directly to Jo's family. We already know that Jo is not the kind of person who will simply sit back when someone threatens the people she loves, and the enemy may know that too. If someone inside the operation is feeding information to the outside, then they don't need to tell the enemy everything. They only need to give them the right information at the right time. And one of the most valuable pieces of information they could have is knowing exactly where Jo's daughters are and how to use them against her. That is why I keep going back to the moment in the promo where Jo's team is moving the girls. Something about that situation feels wrong to me. We don't know exactly what happens next, but if another vehicle suddenly gets in their way, there is a very real possibility that this is not some random problem. It could be an attack designed specifically to separate Jo from the people she's trying to protect. And if that happens, I don't think Jo is going to think twice before going after them. This is the part of the story where Jo's personal side could completely take over her professional side. She can follow orders when she's dealing with an operation, but when her daughters are involved, all of those rules become much harder to follow. And the people behind this may understand that perfectly. They may actually be counting on Jo to react emotionally because they know exactly how she will respond. Imagine if the infiltrator gives the enemy just enough information to locate the girls. They don't have to reveal everything about the CIA. They don't have to expose the entire operation. They simply need to say, "This is where Jo's daughters are." From that moment, they could create a situation that forces Jo to make a choice. Follow orders and trust the agency, or go after her family herself. And we already know what kind of choice Jo would make. She would go after her daughters. There is almost no question about it. That is why I think this could eventually connect to the present timeline. 6 months later, Jo is kidnapped, and we still don't know exactly what happened between these two timelines. But if episode 3 begins revealing that somebody has been tracking her family, then we may finally start seeing the path that leads to that kidnapping. And honestly, I think the enemy wants Jo to come after them. They don't necessarily need to overpower her in a direct fight. They can create a situation where Jo walks directly into their hands because she believes she is rescuing someone she loves. That would be a much smarter strategy. And it would also explain why the people holding Jo in the present seem to know so much about her. They may have spent months studying her before finally making their move. They know how she thinks. They know what motivates her. They know what scares her. And if they have someone inside the CIA helping them, then they could have access to information that nobody outside the organization should have. That is why the breach in episode 3 feels so important. The problem could be sitting inside the same organization she has trusted for years. And once Jo starts thinking that way, I don't think she will be able to trust anyone. Even people who have been fighting beside her could suddenly look suspicious. Every decision becomes questionable. Every piece of information could be a setup. Every location could be compromised. And that is a nightmare for someone like Joe because her entire job depends on knowing who she can trust. If that trust disappears, the whole operation becomes unstable. We could see Joe questioning information from her own people, checking whether communications have been compromised, and trying to figure out who has access to sensitive information. But the more she investigates, the more dangerous it could become because the infiltrator may realize that Joe is getting close. And that's when I think the enemy could stop hiding. They may decide that Joe knows too much and needs to be dealt with before she exposes them. This could also explain why the Russians seem to be playing such a dangerous game. They aren't simply trying to eliminate Joe. They may want to use her as leverage. If they can keep Joe alive and force information out of her, then they can potentially damage the entire Lioness operation. Think about how much pressure that would put on the CIA. Their own team leader has been captured. Their operations may have been compromised. Their enemies know personal details about their agents. And now everyone inside the organization has to wonder whether another person is secretly working against them. That kind of situation creates chaos very quickly. And chaos is exactly what an enemy would want. While everyone is blaming each other, the real infiltrator can keep moving quietly in the background. They don't need to make another obvious move because everyone else is already distracted. And I think this is where Caitlin becomes interesting again. Not because I think she is definitely responsible, but because she is one of the people who has enough access and enough knowledge to potentially understand what is happening. If Joe starts questioning the people above her, that could create a serious conflict between them. Caitlin may believe she is protecting the operation, while Joe may believe the operation itself has been compromised.